The Alpha King found the rejected Omega chained in a beta room. The wolf recognized a fated mate. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Olivia Hayes was not meant to be in this place. Her hands were bound by thick chains, and the room she sat in was a small, dimly lit chamber reserved for those of lesser rank, the beta room. The room was cold and lacked any comforts, with only a small window through which the moonlight barely trickled in. It was a room meant for those who didn't matter. She was the rejected Omega, the one no one cared about, and tonight, as she sat in the corner, she could feel the weight of the entire pack's rejection pressing down on her. Her heart had been broken in front of the whole pack. Her mate, the one she thought would be hers, had rejected her, declaring that she was unworthy, not strong enough. Olivia had never felt so small, so invisible. The whispers followed her wherever she went, the mocking glances from the others only adding salt to her wounds. The pain of rejection was sharp, but there was something deeper, something that felt like it was eating away at her from the inside. She had been cast aside like an afterthought, left to rot in a room meant for those who weren't deemed important enough to belong. The Alpha King's name had echoed through her mind in the days leading up to the ceremony, but she never expected to see him here, not like this, not in her moment of despair. And yet, here he was, entering the room with the grace and authority of someone who had never known weakness. His tall figure loomed in the doorway, his cold eyes scanning the room as though he was searching for something. When his gaze fell on Olivia, it was as if time itself had stopped. He didn't speak immediately, his silver eyes narrowing slightly, studying her with a keen intensity. Olivia had never seen him up close before, but the rumors about the Alpha King were hard to ignore. They called him ruthless, powerful, and untouchable. He was the ruler of all, the one who could crush anyone beneath his heel without a second thought. Yet, as he looked at her, something flickered in his gaze. For a moment, she thought she saw recognition, something unspoken, something that made her heart skip a beat. Olivia quickly looked away, her face flushing with embarrassment. She was nothing compared to him. She was just an Omega, weak and broken. But the king's eyes didn't leave her. It wasn't pity she saw in his gaze. It was something far more unsettling. It was a recognition, a pull between them that was hard to explain. She tried to dismiss it, tried to convince herself that it was nothing, but the feeling lingered. Alexander Thornridge, the Alpha King, was no stranger to power. His reputation had preceded him, but there was something different in the air as he stood in the doorway, still watching her. He could see something in her that no one else had. The connection between them was undeniable, even if it was just beginning to surface. A wolf recognized its fated mate, and in that moment, so did Alexander. The truth hit him like a lightning bolt. She was his. He didn't know why, didn't understand it fully, but the pull was too strong to ignore. As if in a trance, he moved forward, his steps deliberate and slow. Olivia didn't know what to do, her pulse quickening in her throat. She wanted to run, wanted to hide from the intensity of his gaze, but she couldn't move. The power radiating from him was overwhelming. When Alexander stopped in front of her, she lifted her gaze just enough to meet his eyes. The world seemed to shrink around them, and for a brief second, nothing else mattered. He spoke then, his voice deep and commanding, but with a strange softness she hadn't expected. "You are mine," he said simply, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. How could someone like her, a rejected Omega, be the mate of the Alpha King? She opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. Alexander reached out, gently lifting her chin so that she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "No one will hurt you again," he promised, and in that moment, Olivia felt the weight of her world shift. It was impossible, but somehow, in that space between them, it felt like the most inevitable thing in the world. The Alpha King had found her, and she was his fated mate. Olivia stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest as Alexander's words echoed in her mind. "You are mine." They repeated over and over, reverberating through her thoughts like a steady drumbeat. She wanted to protest, to argue that this couldn't be true, that she was just a rejected Omega, but the weight of his presence kept her silent. She couldn't escape his gaze, couldn't look away even if she tried. His eyes, cold as they seemed, held an undeniable depth. There was no pity in them, no mockery, just something else, a strange intensity that made her feel exposed in a way she had never experienced before. As she stood there, still bound by the chains that had held her captive both physically and emotionally, Olivia felt the chains loosen, not in the literal sense, but in the way Alexander's presence seemed to break down the barriers she had built around herself. She wasn't sure what it meant, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel so invisible. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with a mixture of confusion and something else, something she couldn't quite name. Alexander looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, before his lips parted slightly. "Because you're mine," he repeated, this time with a conviction that left no room for doubt. The words sank deep into Olivia's chest, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her body, a warmth that seemed to come from somewhere inside, a place she hadn't known was there. It was as if his words were unlocking something in her, something she had buried long ago. Her heart raced, and yet, in that moment, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't sure if she was ready to accept the truth of what he was saying, but the pull between them was undeniable. Olivia had been rejected by her mate, cast aside like a broken thing. But here was Alexander, the Alpha King, standing before her, claiming her in a way that felt impossible. She had spent so long believing she was unworthy, unimportant, but in his presence, she felt something stir inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. But then doubt crept in, like a shadow at the edges of her thoughts. Was she truly worthy of this? Was she truly deserving of the Alpha King's attention, his claim? She had never been seen for who she was, only for her weakness, her inability to shift. The pack had rejected her, her own mate had turned his back on her, and now, here was the Alpha King, a man who could have anyone, claiming her as his. It didn't make sense. She couldn't make sense of it. Olivia looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "But I'm not strong. I can't shift. I'm nothing." Alexander's eyes softened slightly, though the intensity in them never wavered. "You're everything," he said, his voice low and steady, a promise that felt as real as the earth beneath her feet. "You are more than enough." His words were like a balm to her wounded soul, soothing the raw edges of her heart. Olivia had never been told she was enough. Never had anyone looked at her like this, as if she held some worth, some power that had been hidden from everyone, even herself. But Alexander's gaze, his unwavering confidence, made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken. Maybe she could be something more than what she had been told she was. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that there might be something worth fighting for. But before she could say anything else, Alexander reached out, his hand warm against her cheek, and Olivia felt a shock of electricity race through her at the touch. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, nothing she could explain. But in that moment, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the way his touch made her feel, the way it made her believe that there was something greater at play here, something she couldn't yet understand. She was his, and he was hers, whether she was ready for it or not. And as she stood there, her chains forgotten, the moonlight shining through the window like a beacon, Olivia realized that this was just the beginning. Her journey, their journey, had only just started, and she wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. And that was enough. The moment Alexander's hand touched her cheek, Olivia's breath caught. She had never felt anything like it before, electricity, warmth, a connection so deep it made her heart race. She had been rejected, cast aside, and now here was this powerful Alpha King standing before her, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in her life. It was as though the weight of all the rejection she had felt her entire life had been lifted in that single moment. "You don't understand," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't belong here. I am nothing." Alexander's gaze softened as he looked at her, his hand still resting gently on her cheek. "You are everything," he repeated, his voice firm yet tender. "You are not nothing." You are my mate. You are everything I need. His words resonated deep within her. The words she had longed to hear, but had never thought possible, were coming from the Alpha King himself. She had been cast aside by everyone, but here he was, claiming her in front of no one but themselves. It didn't make sense, but she couldn't deny the pull between them. It was more than physical attraction. It was something deeper, something primal. It was as though their very souls were recognizing each other, a connection that went beyond logic and reason. Olivia's mind raced as she tried to comprehend everything. She had been rejected. She had been invisible. But now, she stood in front of the most powerful man in the realm, and he was telling her that she was more than enough, that she was his. But why me? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Why would someone like you want someone like me? Alexander took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. Because I know what it means to be broken, he said quietly. I know what it means to be rejected, and I know what it feels like to be lost. When I saw you, I knew you were the one. I can feel it. You are my mate, and nothing will change that. Olivia's heart fluttered at his words. The king, the one who had everything, was telling her that she was his. But her mind couldn't shake the doubts that lingered. She was just an Omega. She couldn't shift. She wasn't like the others. How could she possibly be worthy of him? But as she stood there, staring into his eyes, she realized that it didn't matter. It didn't matter that she was different. It didn't matter that she had been rejected. All that mattered was that he saw her, truly saw her, for who she was. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Olivia admitted, her voice trembling. I've been broken for so long. I don't know if I can trust anyone, let alone someone as powerful as you. Alexander's expression softened further as he stepped closer, his hand still cupping her face. You don't have to be ready, he said gently. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to carry this burden alone. His words wrapped around her like a comforting embrace, and for the first time in so long, Olivia allowed herself to believe. Maybe she wasn't broken after all. Maybe she was deserving of love, of protection, of this bond with the Alpha King. She took a deep breath, her chest swelling with a mix of emotions, hope, fear, and something else, something she couldn't quite put into words. But whatever it was real. She looked up at Alexander, her heart pounding in her chest. What happens now? She asked, her voice steadying with the uncertainty that still lingered. Now, Alexander said softly, his gaze never leaving hers, we begin. Together. Olivia's breath caught once more as his lips pressed against her forehead in a gentle kiss, a promise of something new, something beautiful. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a place in it. With him, Olivia could hardly believe the warmth that spread through her chest as she stood in the Alpha King's presence. His words, soft yet powerful, wrapped around her like a protective shield. Together, he had said, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she wasn't alone. As she gazed up at Alexander, the Alpha King, standing before her with unwavering confidence, she couldn't help but feel the weight of his words. He wasn't just offering her protection, he was offering her a place beside him, a future she had never imagined for herself. She had always been an outsider, an Omega who couldn't shift, rejected by the pack and cast aside by her own mate. But here, with Alexander, she felt something she hadn't known she could feel, belonging. The feeling was overwhelming, and for a moment, she simply stood there, unsure of how to process it. But Alexander's gentle touch on her cheek grounded her, reminding her that she wasn't dreaming. This was real. He was real. Are you ready for this? He asked, his voice soft, but there was a quiet strength behind it. Olivia hesitated, looking up at him, the uncertainty still lingering in her chest. I don't know, she admitted, her voice trembling ever so slightly. I've been rejected my whole life. I don't know if I can trust again. Alexander's expression softened, and he took a step closer to her, his hand still resting on her cheek. You don't have to trust me all at once, he said, his voice low and reassuring. I'm not asking you to change overnight. I'm here for you, and I'll be here whenever you're ready. Olivia nodded, her heart swelling at the sincerity in his words. There was no pressure from him, no expectation, just a quiet promise that he would be by her side as she navigated this new chapter in her life. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Maybe she wasn't broken after all. What do we do now? Olivia asked, her voice gaining strength. Now, Alexander said with a small, reassuring smile, we go forward. We face whatever comes, together. Olivia felt a surge of something powerful inside her, a spark of hope that she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just going to be the rejected Omega anymore. She was going to be something more. With Alexander at her side, she could feel the future unfolding before her, one step at a time. As they walked side by side, Alexander's presence felt like a beacon in the darkness, guiding her towards something she had only dreamed of. A future where she wasn't alone. A future where she had a purpose. She could feel the bond between them growing stronger with each passing moment, a connection that transcended the physical and touched. Something deeper, something soul-deep. It wasn't just about power or status. It was about something more, the unspoken promise that they were fated to be together. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her past start to lift, replaced by something brighter, something full of possibilities. I never thought I'd be here, she said softly, her voice full of awe. I never thought I'd be here with you. Alexander turned to her, his eyes softening as he smiled. You are exactly where you are meant to be, he said, his voice filled with warmth. And so am I. They walked on, the night air cool around them, but for the first time, Olivia didn't feel the cold. She felt warmth, a warmth that came from within, and she knew that, whatever came next, she wouldn't be facing it alone. The days following that moment felt like a blur to Olivia. Everything had changed. The weight of her past, the rejection, the loneliness, had slowly begun to lift, but it wasn't gone entirely. She still felt the sting of it deep inside her. But now, there was something new, a lightness she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. Alexander never pressured her, never rushed her to heal or accept the bond they shared. He was patient, always by her side, offering his support without expectations. Each day, they spent more time together, and each day, Olivia found herself growing stronger, more confident, in his presence. They would walk through the gardens of the castle, Alexander always close by, his presence like a comforting blanket around her. His steady demeanor was a contrast to the storm that sometimes raged inside her, but he never faltered. He had made it clear that he was hers, and she was his. It was a bond unlike anything she had ever known, but it was real. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Olivia took a deep breath and turned to him. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. Alexander turned to her, his silver eyes glinting in the afternoon sun. There is nothing to thank me for, he replied, his voice as calm as always. I'm simply keeping my promise. Olivia smiled, a small but genuine smile. She had never realized how much she had craved the simple act of being seen, of being understood. Alexander had given her that. And more. I never thought I could feel this way, she admitted, her voice filled with wonder. I never thought I could be happy again. But with you, it feels like everything is possible. Alexander's hand found hers, his grip warm and reassuring. And you are more than capable of happiness, he said softly. You've always been capable. You just needed to see it in yourself. Olivia squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotions she wasn't sure how to express. She had been so lost for so long, but now, with Alexander, she felt found. The future felt uncertain, but with him by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. As they sat there, the world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in their own little world. Olivia could feel the bond between them growing stronger with each passing day. It was more than just physical. It was spiritual, emotional, a connection that transcended anything she had ever known. She wasn't just his Omega anymore. She was his partner, his equal, and that realization filled her with a sense of purpose she had never had before. She didn't need to be fixed. She didn't need to be someone she wasn't. With Alexander, she could be herself. The woman he saw her as, the woman she was meant to be. The silence between them stretched, comfortable and warm, before Alexander spoke again. You're not alone anymore, Olivia, he said, his voice filled with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. You never will be. Olivia's eyes softened, and she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. Truly safe. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Alexander kissed the top of her head, his arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace. "There's nothing I wouldn't do for you," he said softly. And in that moment, Olivia knew he meant it. She was no longer the broken Omega. She was the Alpha King's mate. And with him, she felt like she could conquer anything. The future was uncertain, yes, but with Alexander by her side, she was ready to face it. Together, Olivia awoke the next morning to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the curtains of her new room. It was a beautiful space, one she had never thought she would find herself in. The walls were adorned with rich tapestries depicting scenes of the moonlit forest, and the large bed she lay on was more comfortable than anything she had ever imagined. As she stretched and sat up, a sense of calm washed over her. She had been through so much pain, rejection, and heartbreak. But now, here, she felt something different. A sense of belonging. It was all so new, so surreal. Olivia took a deep breath and slowly stood up. She hadn't realized how much the weight of her past had held her down until now. There was something freeing about being in this space, about being with Alexander. He had been there for her, standing by her side with patience, giving her the time and space to heal, but also showing her a world of possibilities she had never known. As she dressed in a simple gown, she glanced at the window. The morning air was crisp, and the soft sounds of nature could be heard outside. Birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze. She walked over to the window and looked out over the grounds of the castle. Everything was peaceful. Everything felt right. But as she stood there, a small part of her couldn't shake the uncertainty that lingered. The life she had known, the one of rejection and fear, had been her reality for so long. Now, everything was changing. Alexander had made her feel valued, loved, but there was still a part of her that struggled to accept it. Could she truly embrace this new life? Could she be the mate of the Alpha King? She had never considered herself worthy of such a life, but here she was, living it. Just as she was about to turn away from the window, she heard a soft knock at the door. "Olivia." Alexander's voice called from the other side. Olivia's heart fluttered in her chest. There was something about the way he said her name, something so tender and full of care. She quickly made her way to the door and opened it. There he stood, his tall frame filling the doorway, his eyes glowing with warmth and love. "Good morning," he said with a smile, his voice low and comforting. "I thought I'd come and see how you're doing." Olivia returned the smile, her heart warming at the sight of him. "I'm doing well," she replied softly. "Thank you." Alexander stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. The simple gesture made her heart skip a beat. It was moments like this, small, tender moments, that made her feel truly seen, truly cherished. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, his voice rich with sincerity. "I know things have been difficult, but I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. I'm here. I always will be." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She had never known someone could speak with such certainty, with such unwavering commitment. But as she looked into Alexander's eyes, she realized that he meant every word. He was hers, and she was his. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to hide or shrink away from the love he offered. It wasn't about what she had been in the past. It wasn't about the mistakes or failures she had made. It was about the future they could build together. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I believe you," she whispered, her voice steady and sure. "And I want to be with you." Alexander's expression softened, and he took her hand in his. "We'll take it one day at a time, Olivia. Together." The weight in her chest lifted as she stood there with him. There was no more fear, no more doubt. She wasn't just the Omega that had been rejected and cast aside. She was his mate. And in this moment, with Alexander by her side, she felt like anything was possible. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. With him, she was ready to face whatever came next. The days passed in a peaceful rhythm, each one bringing Olivia closer to the life she had always dreamed of but never believed was possible. As she spent more time with Alexander, she felt the uncertainty that had once consumed her begin to fade. He had promised her that she wasn't alone, and he had kept that promise. He was always there, a constant presence in her life, offering support, encouragement, and most importantly, his unwavering trust. The castle, once a place of uncertainty and fear, now felt like home. Olivia was no longer the Omega who had been rejected and cast aside. She was Alexander's mate, his partner, and she felt the weight of that title not as a burden, but as something beautiful and powerful. She began to see herself not through the eyes of others, but through her own. She was more than enough. She had always been enough. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the castle gardens, Alexander took her hand and led her to the quiet courtyard. The air was crisp, the scent of blooming flowers filling the space between them. "I want to show you something," he said softly, his voice low and gentle. Olivia looked at him with curiosity, her heart fluttering at the thought of another surprise. She had come to learn that with Alexander, there was always something new, something unexpected waiting to be discovered. He led her to a small, secluded area of the garden, where a beautiful oak tree stood tall and strong. Its branches stretched out wide, providing a canopy of shade, and at its base, there was a small stone bench. Alexander gently pulled her down to sit beside him. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said, his gaze softening as he looked around at the peaceful surroundings. "I thought you might like it here, too." Olivia smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle deep in her chest. She had always felt out of place, but here, with Alexander, she felt like she belonged. "I love it," she replied, her voice quiet but sincere. They sat in silence for a few moments, simply enjoying the tranquility of the garden. The only sounds were the rustling of the leaves and the distant chirping of birds. It was a moment of peace, a moment that Olivia had longed for in her life. "You've changed everything for me," Olivia said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I never thought I could feel like this. I never thought I could be happy again." Alexander turned to her, his silver eyes locking with hers. There was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. "You deserve all the happiness in the world," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "And I will spend every day showing you just how much you mean to me." Olivia felt the tears well up in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of joy, of finally finding someone who saw her, truly saw her. She had been broken, but now she was whole. She was loved. "I don't know what the future holds," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I know I want to face it with you." Alexander smiled, his hand gently cupping her face as he wiped away a stray tear. "We'll face it together," he promised, his voice full of warmth and certainty. Olivia leaned into his touch, her heart swelling with affection. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the garden and the quiet strength of the Alpha King, she knew that no matter what came next, they would be ready. Together. As days turned into weeks, Olivia found herself becoming more and more accustomed to her new life. She woke every morning with a sense of purpose, no longer plagued by the isolation and fear that had once defined her existence. The castle, which had initially seemed so cold and imposing, now felt like a safe haven, a place where she could truly be herself, surrounded by love and warmth from Alexander. Each morning, Alexander would join her for breakfast, his presence a comforting reminder that she was no longer alone. They would talk about everything and nothing, sharing their thoughts and dreams, and even their fears. It was in these quiet moments that Olivia realized just how much she had missed out on by shutting herself off from the world for so long. She had spent so many years believing she was unworthy, believing that she was broken beyond repair. But now, with Alexander by her side, she was learning that she was so much more than the hurt and rejection she had experienced. She was strong, capable, and deserving of happiness. One afternoon, as they walked through the garden, Olivia looked up at Alexander with a soft smile. "I've never felt more at peace," she said, her voice filled with quiet contentment. Alexander turned to her, his eyes full of affection. "I'm glad," he said, taking her hand in his. "You deserve this peace, Olivia. You've been through so much, and it's time you had the life you've always deserved." His words touched something deep inside her. For the first time, she felt like she was truly seen, not just as the Omega who had been rejected, but as a woman who had overcome her struggles and found a place where she truly belonged. As they continued walking, Olivia felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for Alexander, for his love and support, but also for herself. She had made it through the darkest days of her life, and now she was ready to embrace the future. That evening, as they sat together in the library, Alexander turned to her with a serious expression. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice steady but filled with a hint of concern. Olivia looked at him, her curiosity piqued. What is it? She asked. Alexander took a deep breath before speaking. I've been hearing rumors, he began. There are those in the pack who are not happy about our bond. They don't understand it, and they don't accept it. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She had known there would be challenges ahead, but hearing it so directly from Alexander made her realize just how deep the divide could be. She squeezed his hand reassuringly. It doesn't matter, she said, her voice firm. We're together now, and nothing will change that. We'll face it all together. Alexander's eyes softened at her words, and he nodded. You're right, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. But I wanted you to know. I will always protect you, Olivia. No matter what. Olivia felt a surge of warmth in her chest at his words. She had always feared that she would be abandoned, cast aside like she had been before, but with Alexander, she knew she would never be alone again. They would face whatever came their way, side by side. Thank you, she whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. I believe in us, Alexander. And I believe in this bond. As the night wore on, they stayed there, in the quiet of the library, just the two of them. It was a moment of peace, a moment where the world outside seemed to fade away. And for Olivia, it was a moment that solidified everything she had come to realize. She was no longer the Omega who had been rejected. She was a woman of strength and courage, and with Alexander by her side, there was nothing she couldn't face. Together, they could conquer anything. As the weeks went by, Olivia found herself becoming more and more integrated into her new life. With Alexander, the challenges they had faced seemed like distant memories, but she knew that they were far from over. In the grand halls of the castle, whispers still lingered, and not everyone accepted her as the maid of the Alpha King. Yet, as the days passed, Olivia began to grow stronger, both in her own confidence and in her bond with Alexander. They faced each day together, their connection deepening with each shared glance and quiet conversation. The bond they shared was undeniable, and while there were still moments of uncertainty, she found herself trusting him more and more with each passing day. She had always feared being alone, abandoned, but now she knew she would never face the world without him by her side. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the castle grounds, Alexander stood by the window of their chambers, his silhouette framed by the light. Olivia watched him for a moment, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. Are you all right? She asked softly, stepping toward him. Alexander turned to her, his silver eyes meeting hers. I'm just thinking, he said quietly, about what's ahead for us. Olivia stepped closer, her hand gently brushing his arm. Whatever comes, we'll face it together, she said, her voice steady with the certainty she had gained over the past few months. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Alexander's gaze softened, and he smiled at her, a rare and genuine smile that lit up his face. You make everything seem possible, he said, his voice low and filled with affection. Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had never imagined she could be the source of such warmth, such strength. She had always seen herself as weak, as the one who had been cast aside, but now, standing here with Alexander, she felt powerful. She felt like she could take on anything, as long as he was by her side. As the days turned into weeks, their bond continued to grow. They spent their days together, walking through the castle grounds, discussing matters of the pack and the future, and sharing quiet moments in the evenings. There were still challenges ahead, but Olivia no longer feared them. With Alexander, she felt like she could handle anything. It was more than just the bond of mates. It was a partnership, one built on trust, respect, and a deep, unspoken understanding. And as they walked through the halls of the castle one evening, their hands intertwined, Olivia realized something. She was no longer the Omega who had been rejected. She was Alexander's Luna, and that meant something more than she had ever imagined. It meant she had found her place in the world. It meant she was loved, truly loved, for who she was. And with that realization, Olivia knew that no matter what the future held, she was ready. Together, they would face it all. The pack, the challenges, the obstacles, they would face them together, as partners, as equals. As Alexander's Luna, Olivia knew that nothing could stand in their way.